Gospel singer LeAndria Johnson has had enough of staying quiet, and this time, she's letting it all out. After being publicly called out by Bishop Patrick Wooden for her controversial lifestyle and ministry choices, Leandrea is finally responding, and her clapback has the entire gospel community shook. What she said on camera, it's got people not only questioning Bishop Wooden's motives, but also taking a hard look at the church system as a whole. And believe me, it's not what you're expecting. Welcome back to the channel where we bring you the most jaw-dropping, thought-provoking, and downright controversial stories shaking the gospel world and beyond. Today, we're diving straight into a brewing firestorm between two heavyweight voices in the Christian space. LeAndria Johnson, the raw, unfiltered powerhouse of gospel, and Bishop Patrick Wooden, a highly esteemed but boldly outspoken church leader. But this isn't your average church spat. This one's personal, spiritual, and it's blowing up online for all the wrong or maybe all the right reasons. Here's what we're unpacking today. What exactly did Bishop Wooden say that lit the fuse? How did Leandrea answer back? Why is the gospel community so divided over her response? Is this just another public clash between two well-known figures? Or is it cracking open deeper issues like judgment, church politics, and the exhausting demand to appear flawless?
You're about to hear both sides of the story. We've got the full receipts, and we're revealing how this explosive exchange is dragging long-hidden church debates back into the spotlight. You won't believe what was said behind the scenes, and what actually got captured on camera. And don't go anywhere, because Leandria's final words in her response, they'll leave you absolutely speechless. So strap in. This isn't just another headline, it's a revelation. To really grasp why LeAndria Johnson is coming out swinging, we first have to rewind to what lit the match in the first place. And that takes us to Bishop Patrick Wooden's bold, unfiltered sermon, the one that sent ripples through the gospel community like never before. Now, Bishop Wooden isn't new to controversy. Known for his unwavering stance on holiness, church conduct, and what he refers to as kingdom order, he's built a name for himself by calling out what he sees as compromise in today's church. But this time, his message was aimed directly at LeAndria Johnson, and it got personal. The sermon, delivered during a recent service, spread like wildfire across social media. Bishop Wooden took aim at Leandria's public actions, specifically pointing to her past battles with alcohol, her frequent use of profanity during live streams, and her unconventional approach to ministry that many view as outside the norm. At first, he didn't mention her by name, but those in the church and viewers online instantly recognized the target, and soon after, he made it plain as day. "We've got so-called gospel singers," he thundered from the pulpit, "who believe that just because they can sing, they're anointed to lead others. But if you're living like the world and cursing like the world, then you're leading souls to hell, not heaven." The congregation reacted with a mix of amens and stunned gasps. It was bold, unfiltered, and no one could deny exactly who he was referring to. Let's not get it twisted. LeAndria Johnson has never tried to cover up her flaws. In fact, she's one of the rare gospel artists who's been brutally honest about her battles with addiction, the hurt she's endured from the church, and her struggles with mental health. She's spoken openly about being judged for not fitting the spotless image so many expect from gospel singers. But this very public call-out from a high-profile bishop hit on a whole different level. Clips from the sermon quickly went viral, blowing up on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Both fans and critics poured into the comments. Some applauded the bishop for speaking the truth in a woman who, let's be real, has reached people the traditional church often overlooks. And just when folks assumed Leandria would stay quiet, she came back swinging, with a clapback that rocked the gospel industry to its core. But before we get into that explosive response, we've got to unpack why Bishop Wooden's words cut so deeply, and the long simmering tension between gospel music, fame, and the church's expectations that's been quietly building for years. Long before the clapback, before the controversy, before the sermons and social media debates, there was LeAndria Johnson, a woman who, from day one, refused to fit into the tidy box the gospel world tried to stuff her into. For those unfamiliar with her full story, Leandria first captured national attention by winning Season 3 of BET's Sunday Best back in 2010. And let's be honest, her voice was undeniable, soulful, piercing, raw, powerful. She didn't just perform gospel, she lived it with every breath. But what really caught people off guard wasn't just her incredible vocal talent. It was her bold refusal to play the role of the polished, picture-perfect Christian artist. From the jump, Leandrea made it clear. She wasn't going to pretend to be someone. She wasn't just to make others comfortable. She opened up honestly about her past divorce, her struggle with alcoholism, being a single mother, and even going through homelessness. She never hid any of it. Instead, she used it. Her pain became the platform she stood on. In one unforgettable interview, she famously said, "I'm not your typical gospel artist. I smoke, I drink, I say what I feel. But I love God with all my heart. And He loves me, flaws and all." That level of raw transparency? For some, it was a breath of fresh air. But for others, especially in a gospel industry that often demands picture-perfect personas, it was downright offensive. Many church leaders saw that kind of openness as crossing the line. And that, right there, is where the friction with voices like Bishop Wooden really started to boil. Let's rewind to 2018, when Leandrea went viral for a live stream many dubbed a, quote, church rant. She called out the hypocrisy in the church, spoke on how gospel artists are mistreated behind the scenes, and boldly declared, "I'm tired of this fake church mess." She even admitted to being drunk during the video. It was raw, it was messy, it was human. The video stirred outrage in religious spaces, but it also peeled back the curtain on the silent battle so many gospel artists fight. Artists who feel used by the church, but never truly supported. Here's what's wild. Despite all the backlash, Leandria's following didn't shrink. It grew. Why? Because for every person shouting that she was unholy, there were hundreds more saying, "Finally, someone who understands. Someone who's real." Her fans clung to her honesty. Her critics couldn't deal with it. And through all the noise stood a woman who simply refused to pretend. So when Bishop Wooden called her out, painting her transparency as rebellion and labeling her ministry as harmful, he wasn't just going after her personally. He was striking at the very thing that made Leandrea connect with so many. Her raw authenticity, her refusal to sugarcoat the struggle, and her ability to speak for those the church often leaves out. But Leandrea? She wasn't about to stay silent. Not this time. Her answer to Bishop Wooden's rebuke wasn't just a response. It was a full reclaiming of her voice, her purpose, and her identity. When the church speaks, Leandrea listens. But this time, she wasn't about to sit still and let someone else, especially not the pulpit, control the story. After Bishop Wooden's not-so-subtle call-out, LeAndria Johnson took to social media, and what she said left people speechless. She didn't lash out. She didn't curse. She didn't tear him down. Instead, she delivered truth, with power, with grace, and with the kind of emotional weight that only someone who's lived through years of church hurt could carry. In a 25-minute Instagram Live that quickly went viral, Leandrea addressed the elephant in the sanctuary, sitting calmly but with fire in her eyes. She opened with a line that was simple but sent chills. "I'm tired of being your punching bag. I'm not perfect, but I'm not your project either." She never said Bishop Wooden's name directly, but just like his sermon, everyone knew exactly who she was referring to. She went on to unpack what she described as the toxic standards of perfection within gospel culture. "Y'all want me to be clean, sanctified, dressed up on that stage. But when I'm struggling, when I'm in pain, when I'm reaching for help, where's the church? Where's the bishop?" The emotion in her voice? You couldn't miss it. This wasn't just a clapback. It was a testimony, a cry for truth, and a sermon in itself. Leandrea didn't hold back as she called out the glaring double standards among church leadership, pointing out how male pastors and ministers who mess up are often forgiven quietly, restored behind closed doors. But women like her, they're dragged in public, labeled damaged, and tossed aside. Y'all crucify women in this industry when they fall, but when it's a man, you form a prayer circle and call it restoration. And the comment section? It exploded. Messages poured in. "Leandrea, you're speaking for all of us. They kicked me out of church too. This is exactly why folks are leaving the church, because of this judgment." One thing was clear, she struck a nerve, a deep one. And she wasn't wrong. Her words were unfiltered, but they carried purpose. She made it clear. She's not trying to tear the church down, but she's also not about to sit in silence while it continues tearing apart people like her. People trying to heal, still believing God can use them.
Gospel singer LeAndria Johnson has had enough of staying quiet, and this time, she's letting it all out. After being publicly called out by Bishop Patrick Wooden for her controversial lifestyle and ministry choices, Leandrea is finally responding, and her clapback has the entire gospel community shook. What she said on camera, it's got people not only questioning Bishop Wooden's motives, but also taking a hard look at the church system as a whole. And believe me, it's not what you're expecting. Welcome back to the channel where we bring you the most jaw-dropping, thought-provoking, and downright controversial stories shaking the gospel world and beyond. Today, we're diving straight into a brewing firestorm between two heavyweight voices in the Christian space. LeAndria Johnson, the raw, unfiltered powerhouse of gospel, and Bishop Patrick Wooden, a highly esteemed but boldly outspoken church leader. But this isn't your average church spat. This one's personal, spiritual, and it's blowing up online for all the wrong or maybe all the right reasons. Here's what we're unpacking today. What exactly did Bishop Wooden say that lit the fuse? How did Leandrea answer back? Why is the gospel community so divided over her response? Is this just another public clash between two well-known figures? Or is it cracking open deeper issues like judgment, church politics, and the exhausting demand to appear flawless?
Let's be honest, this wasn't just a spat between a bishop and a gospel singer. What we witnessed was a full-blown clash between two very different visions of what the church should represent. And now, the aftershocks are pulling back the curtain on just how divided those visions truly are. Gospel artists react, subtle shade and quiet support. Behind the scenes, a number of gospel singers, some of whom have previously worked alongside Leandrea, began quietly showing their support. You didn't see bold statements or viral call-outs, but what you did notice were the little things that spoke volumes. Tasha Cobbs Leonard liked a clip from Leandrea's Instagram Live. Kiera Sherd reposted a quote about giving people space to heal in their own way. Jonathan McReynolds, known for his peaceful tone, tweeted, "Grace isn't grace if it's only given to people who act like you." Now, to the untrained eye, those might seem like harmless gestures, but to those watching closely, these were subtle signals. Quiet confirmations that not everyone in gospel music is buying into the harsh, judgment-heavy narrative. But while some offered those soft nods of support, others made no attempt to keep it quiet. Church leaders weigh in. The respectability police show up. Several big-name bishops, pastors, and Christian influencers jumped online. Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, criticizing Leandrea's response. They labeled her as rebellious, unrepentant, and even a source of spiritual confusion. One viral clip from a megachurch pastor in Atlanta accused her of leading people astray by normalizing imperfection in the pulpit. A church blog went even further, writing, "This is the fruit of a generation that refuses correction. We're raising ministers who chase fame, not transformation." Now, those words might sound holy on the surface, but for many listeners, they felt more like thinly disguised jabs, steeped in church politics, wrapped in ego. But here's the twist. The people are watching this unfold, and their response? Very different from what the church gatekeepers expected. Public pushback. The people speak out. All over TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, thousands of everyday folks, especially those who grew up in church but walked away, are using Leandrea's story to voice their own pain and truth. Here are just a few of the comments gaining serious traction. "This is why I haven't set foot in a church in a decade. Too much perfection preached, too much shame practiced. Leandrea may not be perfect, but at least she's authentic. That bishop could have picked up the phone, but he chose the pulpit. Why? It's always grace, until it's someone they don't approve of. Then it's judgment." The message is clear. More and more people are turning away from performance-based Christianity. They're not looking for polish, they're looking for real, for transparency, for leaders who don't act flawless and don't require others to fake it in order to be accepted. And for those people, Leandrea's story isn't just a scandal. It's a mirror. Leandrea is not the villain here. She's the voice so many have been waiting on. Industry fallout, contracts, concerts, and career consequences. Let's not act like this firestorm doesn't come with consequences. According to sources within the gospel circuit, some event promoters have already started to quietly back away from booking Leandrea following the controversy. Her fan base? Still rock solid. But when it comes to church-affiliated conferences and platforms, there's hesitation, nervousness over potential backlash, or being dragged into political drama. There's even been chatter that a few Christian radio stations, especially the more conservative, traditional ones, are reconsidering her placement in their music rotation. And that's the part nobody really says out loud. Speaking up in the gospel world, especially when it challenges a revered bishop, doesn't just bring spiritual risk, it brings professional consequences. But if Leandria's scared, you wouldn't know it. In fact, she recently doubled down, posting on her story, "I'd rather lose platforms than lose myself." That quote right there? That's become the new gospel. It's the message that's resonating with an entire generation. People who've been hurt, silenced, and shut out, but are still chasing God beyond the walls of religious judgment. Now that the storm has fully broken loose, one question is echoing throughout the gospel community. What's next for LeAndria Johnson? Will the church finally make space for her truth, for redemption that doesn't require perfection? Or will they push her to the sidelines again, all while still singing her songs on Sunday mornings? Let's break down what's really happening behind the curtain, and why this might just be the moment that redefines Leandria's entire trajectory. Still standing, Leandria isn't backing down in the aftermath of her viral clapback. Most assumed she'd fall silent, maybe lay low, offer a soft apology, or drop a polished PR statement. But nope, that's not what happened. Instead, she leaned in even harder, doubling down on her message of raw authenticity, spiritual grit, and radical self-acceptance. Just days later, she went live again, not to defend herself this time, but to pray for the very people who condemned her. "I'm not mad," she said. "I hurt, but I'm not bitter. I still believe in God. I still love the church. But the church needs to do better at loving people back." She opened up about how this entire ordeal hasn't broken her. It's reignited her purpose. Not as a celebrity, but as a vessel for people who feel spiritually homeless. And maybe, just maybe, that's where her greatest strength lies. Because while institutions might turn their backs, the people keep showing up. Tour stops in cities like Chicago, Charlotte, and Houston, ticket sales have surged. Folks aren't just coming to hear her sing. They're coming to be healed by someone who understands their wounds, without pretending those wounds don't exist. Quiet support from powerful allies. And now, this is where things start to get even more interesting.
Behind closed doors, some very powerful figures in both the gospel and entertainment industries are quietly backing Leandria. Sources indicate that Tyler Perry's team has shown interest in collaborating with her for an upcoming stage play that centers on church hurt and personal redemption. One insider close to Perry shared, "Tyler has always admired artists who exude rawness and authenticity. Leandria's story resonates deeply with his audience. It's real, spiritual, and beautifully messy in the most human way. Even Oprah's network is reportedly considering a documentary or special that would highlight Leandria's journey from Sunday best to spiritual battles and beyond." At the same time, gospel legends like Yolanda Adams and Donnie McClurkin, who have their own experiences with public judgment, are said to be reaching out to her privately with words of encouragement. We want to hear your thoughts, and not just the polite ones. Get real in the comments. Speak your truth. And if you believe in creating space for honest conversations, for boundless grace, and for people who love God even when they don't look the part, hit that like button. Drop a comment with your perspective. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our deep dives into the stories shaking up the church, gospel culture, and everything in between. And hey, share this video with someone who's ever felt like they weren't church enough to be loved. Let them know they're not alone, because this story, it's not just news, it's a movement. And you're a part of it.